it all in, one by one. Poet beats.
Greetings, beloved. Rev here. Hey, y'all, listen, we've got a great episode. I am right now calling in from LA. I'm at LA Climate Week where we've premiered some film as well as been a part of some discussions, and we're doing some documentary work here and just having a ball at LA Climate Week. But I had to pause. I had to pause because we got to have this very important conversation with one of our favorite scientists that exists on this planet that we call Earth. But before I get to Dr. E, let's get to Lindsay, who's our co-host. Lindsay, what you got to say for the people today?
Hello, good people. I am super glad to be here as always. Before we had gotten started, was looking at Dr. E's bio, and I can't wait to get into it because I have questions. So, like, I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited for another great episode of the People's Power podcast. So let's get into it.
All right, all right. Listen, we keep saying Dr. E, but officially it's Dr. Erica Holliman-Hill. Dr. E is one of our favorite scientists, not only in the state of Georgia, but throughout the whole entire planet. Doc, it's good for you to be with us. Can you greet the people and just tell them a little bit about yourself?
Man, it is a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's always great to be amongst friends and colleagues doing this work because that's a rarity these days where you have folks that you love and care for doing the work together. And so I thank you, Lindsay and Rev, for having me. Born and raised right here in Atlanta, still staying in the same house that my mama and grandmama bought years ago off of Headland and Delow. Blessed to be able to come back now home to continue to do this work that I always knew that I wanted to do as a little girl, which was be a scientist. Didn't understand at the time the ordered steps that were taking place from when I decided that that's what I wanted to do when I was 3 and 4 years old to what I'm doing now. But one thing for sure, two things for certain. I'm grateful for those ordered steps that have brought me to where I am today.
So, Dr. E, I have had the chance to cross paths with you and work with you over the years in multiple spaces in Georgia, which has been great. And I realized as I was reading your biography, there's so many things I don't know about you. And I know I always thought of you in context of like Wawa, and I know we're going to talk about that. And I've always, thought about you in the context of you're always talking about citizen science, right? And so it really made me think about like what is the data that we already have as people and how we contribute to our own story. And we'll get to that too. But marine biology, tell me more about this marine biology. Like, and you're from Atlanta, so what made you think about the ocean? That is so cool.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, again, these ordered steps. Um, Two things. My grandfather would take me fishing here in Atlanta, so I had an opportunity to do freshwater fishing. But every summer, I spent the summer with my best friend, childhood friend, the Brent Martin and the Martins on Brunswick, St. Simons, Jekyll Island, every
Ah,
summer.
got you. Got you.
Not even knowing that I would come back years later and matriculate into a PhD program at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science,
Mm.
College of William and Mary, where I obtained my PhD in marine science. And so marine science is a little bit more interdisciplinary and broader than just marine biology, which is one aspect of marine science that also takes into account chemical oceanography, physical oceanography, um, geological oceanography, as well as, for me, some of the environmental chemistry, which is where I really began to hone in. But when I matriculated um, to William and Mary, I was already familiar with the Chesapeake Bay area because I'm a proud HBCU graduate of Hampton University. Um,
Okay, bless your heart. We're Bison
so
here,
we're doing
Howard. However, for the purposes of this,
it.
we can let Hampton go. That's all
No,
fun.
but, it was amazing actually, matriculating at the time, at Hampton's Marine and Environmental Science program, one of the few HBCUs to actually offer a marine and environmental science program, with Hampton being right on the water, the Hampton River, and
Mm,
so it gave me an opportunity to do what I love, which was being outdoors. I actually started out as a molecular biologist at Hampton,
ooh,
novel course, because um, during my sophomore year of high school, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer.
mm,
And by the end of my sophomore year, she had transitioned. So the same year that my mother transitioned was the same year that I changed my major through a very dear friend who invited me to come with him on a camping trip that the Marine and Environmental Science Department was embarking upon on the Eastern Shore. Hampton had a house on the Eastern Shore, and I went and I fell in love. I did not
mm,
know that there was a whole field dedicated to the things that I already loved being, which was being outdoors, fishing, learning about how the planet works. And this is why exposure is so good. My grandmother says you can't do what you don't know, right? But once
mhm, mhm,
I knew that I had to come back immediately and change my major from molecular biology to marine and environmental science. And I've stayed the course ever since that transition. So, little known fact, I was actually the first African American woman to obtain a PhD from the second oldest college in the country, being the College of William and Mary, through the School of Marine Science when I graduated in 2012 with my PhD.
Let me say that I knew, and I said it prior to us starting this podcast. We knew we were stepping in some high cotton when we asked you to come in. We knew who you were. Again, this is one of our favorite scientists, not only in Georgia but throughout. Doc, when you look at your role and your love and passion for science, also bringing in your own organization. Speak more about your organization and that importance of instilling this legacy uh, to the next generation and the generations to come. And I'm doing that to start talking about the citizen science. First, I want you to just brag on your family for a minute because I think that your story is dope. But what makes it put some cream on the top of that thing is the fact that you've brought in your family as well. So can you just talk a little bit more about your institute as well as your family's involvement in that?
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity. You look back and it'll be 10 years on the 19th that Aika Solutions Incorporated, or Inc., was established as a family owned and operated environmental consulting firm. Um, Starting out of the work that I had opportunity and pleasure to be a part of in Newport News, Virginia, with colleagues from the Moulton Community House, All from One, that really reaffirmed what has been kind of my legacy around um, community science and how we translate the cares of our elders, our community members that are living in toxic communities into the scientific language that policymakers and those that then have to enforce or regulate better understand. And I'll give you an example. My family is from Dalton, Georgia. If you had carpet in the 80s, your carpet came from Dalton, Georgia. I do believe that my mother's cancer was related to exposure
mm,
because she would tell a story about Rainbow Creek and this stream that they would play in being various colors depending upon the dye that was common. We know now Dalton is one of the hot spots for PFAS and what's going on. And so, um, again, being able to translate the air is killing us to, oh, we've exceeded EPA's rule for 2.5 particulate matter is where I really wanted to exist, because I knew from what I saw around me that there was a close connection between the disease, the impact on our environment, on our health, and the stories that we not only lived but heard throughout community were related to the environment. And so then being able to have the language to be able to translate back and forth has been where the legacy has existed. And so again, this is now our 10th-year anniversary of running this family-owned environmental consulting firm.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I can't believe it. We're still here. And this year we were able to bring on our second W-2 employee. For those that you understand, that's big news as we are small.
Yeah.
Who
Awesome.
at the time was working for CDC when she was one of those hundreds of thousands of Black women that were let go during this current administration from her position at CDC. But being able to garner and use her just health science knowledge, it made sense. It was a perfect fit. And so again, knowing that I wanted to establish something for the family that we can come back into has been what we've been a part of. And for those of you who know me, also know or may remember that there was Dr. E, and then there was Mama E with these 4 little boys. And for those that even remember, there was my grandmother that was there with me as well, who would travel around the world and around the United States as it relates to environmental justice. You know, I really do consider myself to be a child of the environmental justice movement, having the honor to sit under individuals such as Dr. Mildred McLean Iabahati here in the Southeast, who I would always consider to be my mother of environmental justice here in the Southeast, and for all that she's done in terms of putting forth approaches that really ended up shaping things that we now see as the EPA collaborative problem solving model, or in what I learned it as ACANET, academic community agencies institution. And so being able to bring my boys along with them and reflect back now as these Google photo memories pop up on the phone, that they don't understand who they're sitting in pictures with Dr. Bullard, Dr. Beverly Wright, Iya Bahati, who they've participated in the summer programs for the Black Youth Leadership Development Institute. They don't have an understanding of what that means, but it's about sowing these seeds, to your point, Rev, for the next generation, that they will have some institution that has been a part of them that they can move forward. And so just
Yeah,
really, really excited.
and Doc, speaking of Mama Bahati, as well as the shaping of your sons, and going back to citizen science, Mama Bahati is by far not just a forward thinker when it comes down to citizen science, but a pioneer when it comes
That's
down to
right.
citizen science. And we got to get we got to get Mama
Yes,
on
you
the
do.
show, but let me brag on her a minute and just say it was through her citizen science movement that they put to stop the Coca Cola. To be very clear, she took on Coca Cola and was able to get victory through citizen science. So let's talk a little bit about citizen science. I would consider you are definitely a trained scientist, academically trained, but also through community. But then I consider your boys scientists because they understand the importance of citizen science. Can you talk a little bit about that importance of the role of a citizen scientist?
I think the role of citizen scientists is intricately connected to our everyday lived experience. Every aspect of our lives can be summarized or has been summarized or will continue to be summarized in someone's statistical data analysis, where when we aggregate all the data, we're talking about um, the wholes of populations and the means. But when you deaggregate it down to the individual, that's our lived experience that each of us have every day. And so for me, it became how to connect that everyday lived experience to these data sets that are often used to describe and summarize our most impacted communities, right? We are here in Atlanta. We could talk about the wealth gap. We could talk about some of the statistics around that if you are born in poverty into Atlanta, you are 4 times as likely not to get out of that situation. And or in terms of exposure to where we're now seeing a rollback on environmental regulations and laws, what does that mean for the communities that are surrounding these industries that are fence line that we fought so hard to get these regulations in place that are now going to have an immense impact on future generations? We can even think about something as much as like poor air quality being linked to poor maternal health outcomes, both for the child and the mother. And then you think about the I-75 corridor coming through Atlanta, and depending upon what side of the city you're coming in at what time, sometimes you see the haze coming from 20 east west into the city and you just see the haze. Well, is there a relationship between the world's largest and most busiest airport that also plays a silent part in air quality in Atlanta and some of the maternal health outcomes that we see here? And so, again, it's about leveraging the power within. And I pause because, we often talk about empowering. And for me, that's such an external, internal thing versus recognizing the power that each of us have through our own lived experience. And now it's catchy. It's the buzz thing. Everybody's coming from their lived experience and, glad that it's catching on. And how do everyday citizens leverage their lived experience to be part of either a solution or moving into the policy space? I was on the phone this morning with a dear friend, Allende Summers of Project South, and we were talking about the MPU systems here in Atlanta, and that it's one of the only places where there's the opportunity to say no for development and projects. And again, how do we leverage these lived experiences that end up showing up? And then, of course, there is the more formalized way of being taught how to understand. And I'm going to use just again, air quality, for example, um, educating community members who are most impacted enough that then they're able to take low cost air monitors and do their own data collection, right? And take that data and connect it to their own lived experience. Again, it's about supporting the power within in the data collection. And it's not that we have to wait for the academicians, or in this case now where we have our grass top organizations getting into research now. Um, we don't have to wait for them to collect the data that we know would support what we see is taking place in front of our eyes every day. It makes me think here in Atlanta again of the Stop Flooding campaign that the Atlanta Watershed Learning Network alum and others have embarked upon to really address the flooding issue that's taking place in Atlanta. And a lot of that being directly related to all of the development that's taking place, that's changing the topography and surfaces that now allow for the flood that came through CAU back in 2024 in September, where that water came down so forceful that it busted out windows on the first floor of a dorm room. And I think we're all scientists, and this is for me, how do we take scientists out of this glass tower and realize that we all question what's around us. We all use our lived experience to make some decision about how and why we're moving in a certain direction, right?
Mm.
Now, if you want to formalize that, that's you making a hypothesis based on the information that you've gathered to then be able to test out that hypothesis to then make a decision on whether or not that hypothesis was true. And so, again, even teaching the boys, your life is your lab. Every day you should be aware of your lab and what your lab is teaching you and how you're shaping your lab as well.
Can I ask you, Doc, I'm curious, what similarities are there between how you gathered information, like in oceanography or marine biology? I don't even know if I'm saying it right. And how you gather information, like in community. Where are those things similar? What can we learn from the process? Like you mentioned, taking it down out of like the glass towers and putting it into the hands of the people who actually have the data represents a story. What can we learn from the official biology process as everyday folks?
Starts with observation, you know, taking a pause long enough to observe, and not only observe, but then be truthful with what you are observing, right? In terms of, to me, part of observation becomes listening, right? Listening to community members talk about generationally all of the individuals that they've seen die from cancer, right? Um, Observing coal dust being dropped or falling on clothes that sit out on a clothesline along a coal yard, and from those observations, then being able to draw or ask the question that becomes the hypothesis. What is the question being asked? Community members have been asking questions for a long time.
Say
They
that
often get
again.
ignored.
Yes,
So it's
say
not
that
that we have
again.
not been in the process of asking
Mhm.
questions, right? It's
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
those questions, because it does not have the academic rigor, gets pushed to be non valid, or the fact that there's not the data. And I would question to say my grandmother's and her friends' recollection of the way things used to be, how many people have died of cancer and aneurysms, the population
That's data.
decline that we've seen. That's data,
That's
Mhm.
right?
data.
And
Yes.
so I think it also begs why we need more of us in these spaces to bring our own lived experience. I now think about sitting through some of the classes that I was taking at William and Mary, and um, some of the foundation coming from a very Western European context. But because I read, I knew that there was history that predated that start. And so even for me, my starting point was from a different vantage in terms of information that was shared, and being able to bring a dissertation that was one of the most community centered type of research projects being done at the time, where a lot of people were looking at the impact on fisheries, or the impact of environmental contaminants on marine life. But I chose to look at that intersection for a population of women potentially being exposed to methylmercury and
Mhm.
understanding that um, I'm landlocked in Atlanta, but we had Fish Fridays, right?
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
cultural connection to the amount of fish that we ate, I knew was not being properly understood to be as significant as we would say a subsistent fisher, right? Because there wasn't the cultural context there. And being able
Mhm.
to bring that lived experience to that understanding and awareness, and then to trust in yourself, trust that your lived experience gives you the knowledge to be able to take those observations, make your hypothesis, but then ultimately draw your conclusions, right? And we know a
Mhm.
lot of our community members that are in contaminated areas have conclusions that don't necessarily meet at the same place of similar, or I would say others who've drawn conclusions about the whys of cancer rates in Cancer Alley, for example, right? And
Mhm.
that we can't just rely on data alone. I think and we're beginning to see more of storytelling and data collection, especially in communities most impacted. But I think that they go hand in hand, that strengthen then the physical data that we are able to collect through, let's say, air monitors, water sampling.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've said often in doing environmental justice work, it's important to me. I want for other people to feel qualified to be able to participate in the conversations. People don't feel qualified. People feel like, oh, well, I don't have the PhD and I don't know policy and I don't know. Let me tell you, and I say it every day, if the policy and the PhD people had all the answers, we wouldn't be here. You can see you don't have to have any special degree to be able to see that for yourself. And I'll say one thing because I appreciate how much you're saying about like the data and data sets and those things. But one thing that I think is definitely true in thinking about environmental justice and why we see things that happen the way that they happen is because of the ideology that's under like our economy. So like for instance, if you think about the court, facts, just facts are the enemy of truth. The whole
Mhm.
idea of court is you have a set of facts and you argue them either way, but just the data alone doesn't necessarily give you the whole story depending on the outcome that you're trying to prove. And so why I would say the reason that we are here is because we got too many people with too much money who have too much to lose by telling the truth about the
Right.
science and the observations that people like us see in our own communities. So so I
Uh,
appreciate how what you're
mhm.
doing with the citizen science.
I think again, you are the doctor of your own life. No one knows your lived experience better than you do. And I say
Mhm.
that in comparison to at the time that a graduate student is entering into the defense stage, there's this understanding that you are now the expert. You even know this subject matter better than your advisor who has been advising you along the way. You are the expert. And so,
Mhm.
in that same similarity, and taking that to say, our lived experiences, no one knows it better than you. No one
Mhm.
is the expert on what you see, how you interpret your lived experience, but you, as a way
Mhm.
of, again, supporting that power that is within all of us. Because each of us, if we are blessed to continue to breathe, are alive and experiencing this life individually
Uh,
and collectively.
you've been working with Green the Church, um, and I want to make sure that that work is also highlighted because I think when we talk about citizen science, one of the most empowering institutions, if you will, that we could have in our communities would be the church. And so, can you explain how you're filtering in your understanding and your expertise of science into these faith communities, and in particular the Black church, in relation to our environmental injustices and our fight for environmental justice.
I am honored to have Green the Church as a client and to be able to support the national organization Green the Church stand up a affiliate chapter here in Georgia. We kicked off last year with our summit, where I and my colleague and cousin Kiana are serving as the state director and program associate here. But as Pastor Ambrose Carroll, who is the founder and president and executive director of Green the Church, says, one thing that our Black churches have is a lot of land. And when we think about the lands and the buildings that we do own, what does it mean to return back to a place where we understood during civil rights era that the churches played a pivotal role in that movement, but there's no separation between that civil rights movement and the environmental justice movement and merging them to really focus on what are the three pillars of Green the Church, which is to actually amplify green theology around an emphasis on messages that, in particular, Christians have a duty to protect God's creation. We've understood this um, intrinsically in who we are and understanding that our personal lived experience is directly connected to God's green earth and that the two go hand in hand. The second pillar being promoting sustainable practices. So, specifically working with our church leaderships to not only make the physical church buildings and operations more sustainable, but also empowering community to be a part of what I like to now say is just a remembrance of what we used to do sometimes, in terms of sustainable practices isn't a new thing to African Americans. I'm thinking about my grandmother now who would go to the
Facts.
bathroom, wash her hands, take that rag, that paper cloth, that paper towel that she used to dry her hands. She didn't throw it in the trash. She put it in her pocket. Why? Because it's still clean. I just wash my hands. I can use this
Mhm.
again. Well, it's
Mhm.
got one more use. If I need to blow my nose, if I need to wipe something off your snotty nose, I have it. I'm not just going to throw it in the trash, right? And so reminding us of our practices that this isn't something new to us, right? In terms of culturally, how do we um, continue to build off of those legacies? And then again, the final kind of pillar of Green the Church nationally and us here in Georgia is around building power for change. And it's like, how do we support member churches in identifying how they can flex that shared political and people power to advocate now for green policy? Again, the churches are often tapped for their political power. But if members are taught and have an understanding on how to flex that power for environmental policy, environmental regulation, and I say policy is only as good as the enforcement that follows, because
Right.
we've had policy on the books, but if it's not
Exactly.
enforced, right,
Facts.
and
Facts.
being able to again leverage what has been at the core of who we are culturally. And I would even broaden it now to say, um, not just Black churches, but Black faith, right? Interfaith, interdenomination, inter understanding of spiritually how we may connect to something greater than ourselves and understanding the connection to being able to care for the planet and one another in a very real practical way, because the way in which we are reverting back to things that we fought so hard for is makes no sense. But good to know that we still got good people on the ground as I'm looking up at people power in the top
That's
uh,
right.
corner, that we are the power, right?
Right.
in terms of how do we now galvanize this people power to talk about the environment. And again, it's about, for me, um, supporting community with a language, not so much new information, right?
Right.
But now let me just tell you how they say it on the other side, right? Not the air is killing me, but oh, we've exceeded EPA's rule for 2.5 particulate matter and things like that.
That's for me, that's where the data comes in at. The data proves what I'm yelling about, what I'm screaming about. When I say it hurts, I can say it hurts, but the data says this is why it's hurting. And
Right,
so when we can share our stories, and that's all really citizen science science is us sharing our stories and recording them. You go through and you're asking, hey, how have you felt since this is coming to this community? Well,
right,
I've been experiencing this. I've been experiencing that. And if you've got enough people saying they've been experiencing this or that, then this is something that we need to look into because this is a pocket of this situation happening. So this means that something has altered and we need to look into it. That's what citizen science is. Science is. And the reason I brought in Green the Church and brought up the faith institutions is because this is one of the most influential places in your community. And if they became empowerment centers for citizen science, are you not fulfilling your Christian mandate? And I think
right.
I can speak on that as an expert because I'm a preacher as well as my education says that that is our job. And not only is that our job, you talked about us reminding the folks of what we used to do and how it used to be. That's why the church grew as large as it did, is because that's what it did, in particular during the civil rights movement as well as the environmental justice movement. The environmental justice movement started out of Warren County,
That's
North
right.
Carolina, through the church. And in
That's right.
particular, these Black church women.
Mm, speak on it.
And we
With
need
the
to
children.
understand with and the children, and the children, those who bodies we see laying down on the ground fighting for us. And today, who's the most vulnerable population amongst us? Our Black women and our children.
Hmm.
They fight for us. We got to fight for them, beloveds. I don't know how I got to that one, but that parentheses needed to be added there, and I needed to jump off just to stand up for my sisters to let them know they've been leading. We need to follow.
That's always refreshing to hear in terms of the roles and space that we as women know that we've been holding, even without the acknowledgement of, again, power, even within us, and leveraging, to your point, um, when we look across many of the congregations, it's Black women that are in these churches. And so what does that mean to empower these same women with information that, again, maybe they already have, but they just understand it differently. So it's not about necessarily always imparting new information, like, but just reminding you of what you already know. You call it tomato, I might call it tomato, right? In terms of how we break down the silos of science, this data, research, academia, because we are the institutes. Our lived experiences are the institutes, right? How we observe and draw conclusions from that. Just because it's not validated by someone else doesn't make it not valid.
Absolutely. And that's I think that's what I really want to drive to and tell the people that your story, your words matter. They mean something.
I
They
mean,
are what moves. And don't be afraid to share your testimony. The reality is, as you said, we already talk. We talk to each other. Your best friend know you been hurting. Your
right.
spouse know you been hurting. Your cousin them know you been hurting.
That's
Now,
right.
put it down on paper where you all have shared your experience, shared your hurts. Put it down on paper so you can all come together, pool these stories so you can find this thread. Hey, ever since this thing moved into my community, we've all been experiencing these strange headaches.
Right.
Ever since this thing has been in our community, people in my family and folks, my neighbors' family, people I known for years, family, have died from cancer.
Right.
Or babies have been born with rare forms, rare diseases, or asthma, and all of these things matter. Your stories matter. One of the things that I was thinking about earlier this morning as I prepared for this particular conversation is that we often wear other people's shame, and that
Mm,
keeps us from telling
Mhm.
our stories.
mm,
It
mm.
ain't our fault that we got these headaches and these rare forms of cancer. Hell, it ain't our fault that we live in poverty.
Right. Right.
And we don't have to be afraid to tell the stories of what they've done to us.
That's
That's
right.
their shame, not
Right.
ours. We're the
Right.
recipients of that foolishness and that foolish decision making. We don't have to be ashamed to say, this is what harmed us and this is how it has harmed us.
Right. Right.
It doesn't make us less than, it makes them evil.
Period.
And we need to point out evil,
That's right. That's right.
especially when they know what they did to us, know what they're doing to us, know what
Mm-hmm.
they've been doing to us, and want to continue to do to us.
I,
It's more
100.
than okay for us to call them out for their BS.
Agreed. And again, those shared stories collectively help to validate one another without having to wait for an outside validation. Meaning, regardless of what EPD may say that it does not, or, your stories collectively are able to validate and reassure you, no, you're not crazy.
Mhm.
Yes, the observations that you are seeing are real, right? That
Yeah.
makes me think of Dr. Yomi and the advocacy around precautionary principle, like
Mhm.
not waiting for the data to show that, but to act in a precautionary way where you're acting in a preventive measure, um, even before the data is supporting that. And so again, I think it's about making sure that our communities understand the power of our lived experiences, especially in places and spaces where we are bombarded by being fence and front line around industry. One of the biggest things taking place now is this fight around data centers. And it's interesting because I'm watching more affluent communities fight data centers are being exposed now to environmental harm and injustices in ways that before this data center was slated to come, maybe they wouldn't even know anything about some of the other things, right? That other communities have having to grapple and deal with. And so, how do we again use this opportunity as a bridge for our communities in terms of it's still just one planet, y'all. I know we are flying around the moon and made it back. But for right now, the only place that we have successfully colonized
Is
has
this
been is this one. You know, and
absolutely.
we continue to be better stewards of it, um, to ensure that we aren't leaving things in a worse condition for the future generations to inherit, you know?
Well, Doc, that's a great point for us to end on for this conversation. As I told you prior to us starting this conversation, this is a conversation amongst peers, amongst friends, colleagues. So you all just had an opportunity to hear what we would do in the backyard under the tree, um, with a little bit more tempered and a whole lot more less cussing. Um,
Yeah.
but beloveds, these are the types of conversations that we're having consistently. But these conversations are conversations that we're seeking ways to help our communities to use their voice, to validate them in their stories, letting them know that what they've um, experienced isn't their fault. And they shouldn't have to wear that shame, but should be able to tell those stories, and collectively sharing those stories help move the needle for the solutions that they need for their communities. Doc, thank you so much for being with us. Lindsay, did you have any final words?
No, I didn't. I appreciate being able to learn more about you, Dr. E. And as someone who is afraid of the ocean, when we do finally get together, like I know we've been threatening, I have more questions for you about this ocean. So just know.
Man, it's as much as we have explored out, we have not done that same exploration um, down, and so it's a
Mm,
majestic and magical place that really is at the core of helping to keep the balance of this planet.
mm,
I do want to just end and say, Reverend Lindsay, to to your listeners, remember you are the doctor of your own life. You are the scientist. No one knows better than you your lived experience and what you are experiencing from the first time that industry moved into your neighborhood and you started noticing changes in your body and things. Take it down, jot it down, and understand that collectively we can validate one another without having to wait for academia or others to do that validation.
Amen. And especially in light of this new phenomenon with these hyperscale data centers assaulting our communities, telling your story moving forward and collectively telling this story and gathering the information is going to be extremely, extremely important because this is by far an under-researched uh,
Right.
phenomenon that's happening right now. And so the consequences don't look good according to the
no,
science. Um, we've already experienced climate disruption all over the place with, you know, 1,000-year storms happening every other week, every other month.
Right.
We've experienced flooding, especially in the South, uh, that shouldn't take place or has never taken place. And beloved, the science says there's more to come because of the way that we're living. And with that, we really need to be able to tell our stories so we can explain the change that we're experiencing. Again, Doc, thank you. Thank you,
No,
Lindsay,
thank
for being with us. And thank you all to our listeners for joining us on the People Power Podcast. As always, I offer to you love, peace, and light.